All right, guys, welcome back to CEO.CA. I'm seated with Gwen, Preston, Vice President of Investor Relations for West Red Lake Gold here in Quebec. So excited to bring this conversation to our community. West Red Lake, the company was just on the 5th episode of a little show we call Expeditions.
Yeah.
We looked at the Madsen mine. There was a lot that went on behind the scenes before the restart. So can you tell us about all of that, the history there?
Yeah, for sure. So Madsen has a very long history, and I'll try and make it short, but 40s, 50s, and 60s, it was one of the mines in Red Lake that started Red Lake as a mining plate, a high-grade gold jurisdiction in Canada. It produced 2 million ounces of gold from high-grade rock. So that was a good stint. Then the gold price fell off, and the mine went mostly dormant for quite a few decades. Then in 2014, a company called Pure Gold bought the mine, and they had a great vision, which was to take this body of mineralization and turn it into a new high-grade gold mine in Red Lake, Ontario. And they did some very good work for that, including 180 kilometers of drilling to define the deposit that we still work with now, 1.7 million indicated ounces, grading 7.4 grams per ton gold. So that was some good work for sure. They permitted it, they built a good mill, and they did put the mine back into production. Unfortunately, as they got to the production end of things, they started to, I'd say, cut some corners in their approach. And unfortunately, that meant that the mine didn't make it. So after 14 months of commercial operation, it did go bankrupt. And then we bought it out of bankruptcy. And our premise in buying it is that the corners that they cut, so to speak, those are things that we could fix. Those required operational expertise, access to capital, and just the willingness to dive in and do the work. So that's what we've done for the last 2 years. We bought it in June of 2023, and we've taken it from purchase to production in 2 years. And in those 2 years, we've done 90,000 meters of definition drilling. So that's drilling from underground into that known resource so that we can create a more accurate and higher resolution model of the deposit. Because the first thing that went wrong for that prior operator is that they weren't delivering the mineralization that they expected to the mill. And that's largely because they didn't do that second round of drilling where you tighten up the drill hole spacing from 20 meters to 7 meters. They didn't do that. And so they weren't mining in quite the right spot.
I see.
So we've done a lot of that work. We now have an 18-month mine plan where all of that work is done. And we've tightened the drill hole spacing, updated our model, done the stope design for a year and a half worth of operation. And then that work, of course, just continues. We've also done quite a list of capital projects. Again, in the cutting of corners, there were capital projects that prior company just didn't do or decided that thought they would do later in operations.
What are capital projects?
Yeah, so infrastructure projects is what you want to say. And really, infrastructure projects set you up to operate. And if you don't do them, then you run the risk of not being an efficient mine. And if you want to work as a mine, you need to mine the mineralization that you expect and do a good job of it. And then you need to move and process that mineralization efficiently. Both things are really important. So we've done capital projects like a 1.4 kilometer long tunnel that connects the two portals. That addresses a whole bunch of inefficiencies that existed previously in what size of trucks you could use and how you could move the ore and dumping and reloading. We built a 114-person camp on site, so we didn't have to try and house workers in the town. We did a tailings dam lift. We bought a primary crusher. We did lots of projects so that we could have an efficient mine. And then we tested at least the geologic side of our work with a bulk sample. So really we mined the first 15,000 tons of that mineable inventory with people watching. Auditors came and we showed them our in-house model. They watched us mine, they watched us process and crunch the numbers. And the goal there was to test whether what we expected, tons and grade, matched what we actually got out of the mine.
So would you say it validated the restart?
It absolutely did. To such an extent, the reconciliation was so close that 2 weeks after publishing those bulk sample results, which was a month ago, we announced the restart of the mine. So that was really the final check that we needed to restart the mine, and we restarted it 2 weeks ago. And now we're just in ramp up. The second half of 2025 is going to be all about ramping up. We're starting at 500 tons per day, and we're going to go bigger from here.
Well, tell us also about the Red Lake district where Madsen is in. For the audience that may not know 30 million ounces of high-grade gold pulled out of this area. What does that even mean? Put it into context for what that size looks like.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, Red Lake is one of the biggest and most important, one of the top 3 gold districts in Canada. We're celebrating the 100th anniversary of gold production in Red Lake this summer, which is fun. Red Lake is, for instance, it's in terms of like capturing its importance, it's the place that made Goldcorp into Goldcorp. So Goldcorp was operating the Red Lake mine, and it was a fairly modest operation, 50,000 ounces per year type thing. Then they discovered the high grade zone, and that high grade zone catapulted that mine to be a 500,000 ounce per year producer within only a few years, and turned Goldcorp into the giant that it was before, of course, it merged with Newmont. So the opportunity to find phenomenal mineralization in Red Lake is very well known. I mean, the Great Bear discovery is also only 80 kilometers away. Another great example of high-grade mineralization in these rocks. So Red Lake is known for its gold. And I think what really matters for West Red Lake is that, we have to do quite a bit of work to define that deposit. 7 meter spacing, that's tight spacing for a deposit. But if you do the work in Red Lake, you define where the zone is, then you often get rewarded for the work. So we're pulling drill results out of, for instance, our South Austin zone lately that are really phenomenal. Like 114 grams over 10 meters. We have multiple 18 meter intercepts grading roughly 50 grams per ton. There's really nice mineralization. If you do the work, you get the reward. So that's why we want to restart Madsen, because it makes sense. It makes sense as is, but we also are very excited to see what else we can find and define within the known deposit by tightening up the drill spacing, which lets you see the high-grade lenses, and find around or deeper or on the property package in addition to the deposit, because that's what you get for putting in the effort in Red Lake.
And high-grade gold is harder to find. What do you guys do as a team so that, despite the hard work, it's manageable?
Yeah, so it's all about having efficient setup and sort of understanding what the goal is. So our goal, first and foremost, for sure, is to get the Madsen mine back in operation. So we've done 90,000 meters of drilling, and the vast majority of it has been focused on filling our 18-month mine plan so that we have those tons defined and the optionality to move things around depending on what happens. And so that really matters. Now, we have a pipeline of targets around the deposit, below the deposit, and regionally, like just on our property, that we're really excited to test. For instance, there's a target called North Shore, which is about 1 kilometer to the northeast, sort of along the structure. We drilled that last year. We pulled 150 meter intercept of rock that looked very exciting. It was Madsen-like in its alteration and in its veining, and it didn't really grade. But at the same time, we ran a till sampling program that highlighted a Madsen-like till target just 200 meters to the west, where it happens to sit right over where the volcanics come up against an ultramafic unit. And I know that's technical, but that environment is exactly the kind of environment where you can often find really high-grade gold in Red Lake. So that's a really enticing target for us. Were those 150 meters of really nice looking rock actually just on the edge of something that is like Madsen? So we have that target. We're excited about that target. We'll get to that target once we've achieved the most important goal,
establishing,
get Madsen into operation, get ourselves into cash flow, and then attack the list of exciting targets that we have.
And cash flow will be happening within the 18th month window?
No, so I mean, we're in production now. We started at 500 tons per day. We started pointedly at that level because our first goal is to really start making sure that we don't need to finance anymore to cover our operations. So 500 tons per day is about the level that we need to process so that the mine pays for itself. The thing about ramping up a mine, an underground mine, is for the last 6 months, we've been operating an underground mine without producing much gold, except for when we ran the bulk sample. So now we're in production, we're producing gold, we're meeting our needs, and so we're going to ramp up from here so that we can start, generating actual free cash flow for our investors. The whole thesis of West Red Lake Gold from the beginning was to give investors exposure to the value that is created with new gold production. So we want to create new gold production at Madsen to give investors that ride on the sort of second half of the Lassonde curve, so to speak. And then ideally, we want to do it again with another asset.